Dr. Joan Borysenko is a distinguished pioneer in integrative medicine and a world-renowned expert in the mind-body connection. She has helped revolutionize the role of meaning and the spiritual dimensions of life as an integral part of health and healing. She is a bridge between faith and reason, whose work spans hospitals, hospices, conference rooms, theaters, boardrooms, and places of worship. Joan ultimately earned a doctorate in medical sciences from Harvard Medical School, and she went on to complete 2 postdoctoral fellowships, one in cancer cell biology, and then after being very impacted by the death of her father from cancer, went on to obtain a postdoctoral fellowship in the behavioral sciences and behavioral medicine. She founded the Mind Body Clinic, became a licensed psychologist, went on to publish the New York Times bestseller, Minding the Body, Mending the Mind, and is an author or co-author of 16 additional books. Joan is currently a founding partner of Mind Body Health Sciences in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where she lives with her husband. And I had the honor of meeting Joan in the last couple of years. I like to collect wonderful people, and somehow I managed to collect Joan. And she reviewed my book, Learning to Walk in India, and I have gone on to be able to sort of use her as a mentor. And we're really blessed to have her here today, especially during this time of the COVID pandemic. And so I felt like it would be a really good idea to bring her level of wisdom, her breadth of experience. I mean, Joan is like an elder for a lot of us, and to bring her experience to what is unfolding now and sort of how we can work with it in our lives. And so I'm going to stop talking now and hand it over to Joan. But Joan, I'm wondering if you can share with us just some greater perspective around what is unfolding now for us as a human race.
Molly, first of all, how wonderful to be with you. And if any of your listeners haven't read Molly's book, Learning to Walk in India, I can tell you that it touched me deeply, because Molly has a tremendous amount of courage and a tremendous amount of faith and amazing resilience. Before we began this recording, Molly and I were talking about the fact that in other places of the world, there have been, many very difficult problems over our lifetime. And now we have refugee camps and widespread trauma and such difficulties, wars that are still going on. Other countries have had times of genocide. But we in the United States have really been very, very protected. And for us here, it's really a time that, well, what can I say? It's so difficult. First, the fear for loved ones because of the virus. And secondly, the loss of jobs. So it's a really difficult time all around the world. And what I want to compare this to is something that might surprise you. And that's the hero's journey, the archetype of soul growth. Some of you might know the work of the famous late mythologist Joseph Campbell. But what he talked about, which is true both in the United States and in the world, is that life as we know it now has come to a halt. That's the first stage in the hero's journey, when all of a sudden you're thrust into a totally foreign reality, and that's it. Then that's stage one. Then you go through a period that we're in now, and it's a period of uncertainty. It's kind of like a vision quest experience. In fact, the man who first wrote about the vision quest, an anthropologist by the name of Victor Turner, called the time after a big shock like that and change of state. He said, it's the time between no longer and not yet. Your life as you know it has ended at that time, and you have not yet lived into the life that wants to be born, the life that is becoming. And so Joseph Campbell called this time of uncertainty the dangerous night sea journey, because we don't have necessarily markers or anchors to hold on to. And in the time of the night sea journey, there can be several different outcomes. Unfortunately, some people just don't have any hope. They become anxious, they become depressed. Some of them will kill themselves. This is true in all kinds of emergencies. And these are really difficult outcomes. A very different kind of outcome, I'll put on my psychologist's hat, would be called post-traumatic growth, for people really finding new strengths, locating their center, using their faith. And at the end of it, those various kinds of strengths that they found and used help them to come out into the third stage of the hero's journey, which is called the return. And in the return, the hero, or in our case, Molly, the heroines, come out not only stronger before, but with wisdom, very precious wisdom, to share with their families, with their communities, with their world. And what you get from this is an evolutionary upgoing spiral. So just to recap that, the first stage is separation from life as you know it. The second stage, that place of uncertainty, is also often called the liminal phase, because it's a threshold. Limin is the threshold of the new. But you go through liminal phase and then come to the return. And you know, Molly, that I'm so interested in story and in narrative. And the shape of this kind of narrative is the shape of a smile. You start here, you kind of go to the underworld of uncertainty, and you come back out transformed. And that's my hope for our world, because in this time of such crisis at every level, and in so many countries, the cracks in the foundation of of our world have become very, very clear. And issues of inequality, of income inequality, of racism, all of those systemic problems, the issues in the healthcare system in this country, all of these issues are now sitting there in broad daylight. And there is a chance that we'll get to address them. So we're at a tipping point, and I do believe that it takes every single one of us, to tip in a positive direction, which means that individually we need to understand what it is to be resilient. And I'm going to make a little segue here and then be quiet for a moment for your response, Molly. But one of the main characteristics of resilient people is that they have some kind of faith that allows them to make a higher order meaning. And that becomes the anchor they hold on to during this time of uncertainty, during this night sea journey.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Whew, thank you for all of that. Wow. I love the analogy of the smile, of this brutal arc that we have descended into, the dangerous night sea journey. We're here. And we're here. I wouldn't have wished this on anybody. wouldn't have wished this pandemic on the world, and yet we are here. We are in the dangerous night sea journey, and so what I would love to hear about from you, Joan, Joni, is about, you know, when we're in this dangerous night sea journey and things have basically, life as we know it has fallen away, there is uncertainty, and all of a sudden there isn't a whole lot to rely on externally. And so then what is it that becomes the North Star? What is it then that becomes that which we, you know, place our faith, our hope, our trust? What is it, you know? And I'd love to hear about that.
You know, that's different, of course, for every one of us. I remember, Molly, when I was running a clinic at one of the Harvard teaching hospitals during the AIDS epidemic, in the beginning, when basically everybody died. That was a time when a long survivor, a miracle story, was maybe 2 years of survival. And I became, I already was, but I became even more fascinated with the stories that people tell themselves about why bad things happen. And you can learn a lot about that. And then if you become aware of your story, if it's not such a good story, the idea is, can you change your story so that it becomes something inspiring and positive, so that it becomes a North Star, even if you don't have one already? So I want to share, you know, a couple of stories there. And you too, as a nurse, you've many stories, and you hear from people things you would never ever expect to hear. You know, I remember a young mother with a very aggressive form of breast cancer and 2 little kids. And after about a year, she said to me, I don't know whether I'm going to live or die from this. And this is going to sound weird for you, to you, but I actually wouldn't trade it. I feel like I have become more fully human, more myself. And if I die, the legacy I leave for my children will be a richer one. And if I live, I'm already such a much better mother. And you do hear that. It sounds amazing. So I would say that some of my faith comes from watching people in difficult situations somehow or other transform right in the middle of them and be grateful. And so I would say that for her, gratitude was a kind of North Star. Then I'm remembering one of my AIDS patients, and he was amazing. His name was Mark, and Mark came to me and he said, "Look, I know that I'm going to most likely die from this. I'm hoping to live longer than other people. I don't expect mind-body medicine is going to cure AIDS." He said, "What I want to do is practice dying so that I'll be less afraid of living." And we, just in the process of practicing that dying, he actually developed a very deep faith that the number one, that his soul was eternal, immortal, ancient, that when his body went, his soul was going to survive. And he became, because of that very deep faith that he developed in the face of death, he became a mainstay of the AIDS community. You know, he did so much local organizing and working with people. So people come to a sense of faith in different ways. They also, faith can change. I want to say this about the AIDS epidemic. One of the most common stories back then was young men who would say that they left their church because it wasn't right to be gay in that church, and they knew who they were, and that was it. And then when the AIDS epidemic came, they had a crisis of faith, and they said, could it be, that some God is punishing me for being gay? And often that kind of questioning leads down the rabbit hole to depression. But what I did was find, get acquainted better with all the hospital clergy, and through them found ministers of every faith, even people, who had been raised in very fundamentalist streams of faith, for example. You can find ministers of the same denomination who do not have that angry God point of view at all, but have the view that the universe is loving. And so I found myself like being a hub for getting people to the right clergy who could help them straighten out their feelings of faith. So I want to say that there's no one way, that we all have had whatever life experience we've had. And it's very important, I think, to find a community, to find a mentor that helps you explore these things. Molly, you know a little bit about my own story, and that I've always said, I've had an odd life. There must be something strange about my brain, because through the years I have had so many experiences of literally divine light, of pure loving kindness, experiences that tell me that beneath the surface of all our fear, all of our anger, all of our polarities, all of our differences, that within each person there is, whatever you want to call it, your God self, your higher self, your true nature, which is an awareness of deep loving kindness itself that's connected to all that is. And that, of course, is my North Star. And one of the things, a lot of people have had experiences like that. It's surprising. If you start to talk to people, how many have had a near-death experience, or when a loved one died, actually saw a three-dimensional apparition of that person who came to them and comforted them afterwards. We don't talk about those things much in our society. And of course, Molly, you and I, coming from Western medicine, these are things that get kind of laughed off, like, what, a light, a tunnel, beings, beings of light? That's just the trick of dying brain cells. But if you've had an experience like that, and it has transformed you, and you have become more brave, or more loving, or more compassionately have more compassionate perspective, whatever causes it seems realer than the reality that we live in every day. And I think for everyone, it's inspiring to read accounts of people who, in very dark times, often literally as they were at death's door, had transformations. We need to know that when we are at our most fully human, we are loving beings. We are, what can I say? We are godly beings. There's no language for this that doesn't ring somebody's bell the wrong way. But we can always feel when we're in the presence of somebody who has touched that center inside them. And when we do, we're contagious. We uplift other people. I call this being graceful, being full of grace. And that, of course, that's my faith.
Mm. Wow, thank you, Jenny.
Yeah.
You said something that I just want to reemphasize, and when you were talking about, I think it was one of the AIDS patients, you mentioned something about becoming more human. And I don't remember your exact words, but my sense is we have, as a, well, society, humanity, the world right now, we have been brought to our knees. Like you mentioned earlier, other cultures, other countries have been through devastating things for many years. This is not different for them. You know, this is something else, but it's not different. But our country and many other countries have been brought to our knees, and perhaps there is the opportunity, as you eloquently said, to become more human with each other when we are brought to our knees and we don't have anywhere else to go. And also at that point, it feels like a really good time to do grieving that we haven't done. And, you know, within ourselves, from our lives, but also the collective grief that is still here. I mean, our country was founded on the back of slaves. And at, you know, the same time, a whole nation of people were, I mean, a pretty brutal act took place on our soil, where you and I are out here in the West and all over this country. And those things haven't really fully been grieved. And now we are brought to our knees, and we're being forced to stop. And perhaps there is an opportunity to metabolize some of that, which is still in here in the collective. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, and I wanted to try one more thing in there, because, you know, speaking about the different faiths and, you know, how people are responding differently, and, you know, there certainly isn't a formula. And there is something underlying all of that, which you named, the unconditional love. And I think it was Muktananda said, I have this quote on my fridge, that is real, which never changes. And so while the apparent world that we live in is always changing, and cells and everything are always changing, there is something underlying all of it that doesn't change, from which peace, from which the love comes, you know, the unconditional love. And so I would love to hear from you how you feel that sort of ties into this bigger unfolding that we're finding ourselves in the midst of.
Well, Molly, that which you just described is the ultimate anchor, the ultimate North Star. I've always held on to this wisdom saying from the Hindu tradition. I don't know if it's from the Vedas or the Upanishads. I don't remember the exact source, but essentially the idea is that there is a core within us that cannot be cut by a knife, burned by a fire, or crushed by a stone, that is eternal, immortal, ancient, and whose nature is perfect love. And it's these things, in a way, they're very abstract until you have an experience of them. I want to tell our listeners the briefest version of the story of my mother's death. And this for me is something I go back to over and over, because I experienced that core that never changes. It was absolutely amazing. So she was in a hospital dying, and my son, who was 20 at that time, and I were sitting on opposite sides of her bed. It was at about 3 a.m, and we'd been sitting there keeping the deathbed vigil. And I'll just say parenthetically that my mother and I never got along very well. In fact, just a few hours before she had kind of her last final shot of morphine, and that, you know, prepared her to go out, we had a wonderful moment of forgiveness between us. That's a great when it can happen. But so there we were sitting on either side of her bed, and I suddenly I felt this kind of abrupt shift in my body. It didn't feel like I was waking or dreaming. It felt something totally different to me, like I'd suddenly woken up. And the experience was I was having a vision in which I was a pregnant woman giving birth. And it was the most remarkable experience because I had one consciousness as both mother and child. We were not two, but one. And, you know, I was witnessing this. So my everyday consciousness actually started to laugh. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is really interesting. God is like a case of multiple personality disorder. There's only one of us here, same consciousness in these two bodies. And then as the baby coming out through the birth canal, which I will say was not such a pleasant experience in the vision, I came out into the light. And the light was not just a light, but what people describe as in near-death experiences as a being of light. I was conscious of it, and it was conscious of me. And I realized it knew me better than I knew myself. It knew every thought that I'd ever thought. It was so intimate. And there's no way to put it into words, Molly. It was pure, ineffable, loving kindness. It was pure mercy. Sometimes when I try to describe it, I said, it's like a cheering section for the soul. And it's there. And I also realized that same core of loving awareness, of complete mercy, was present within me. It was really beyond words, absolutely. And then I had a series of, what would you call it, like vignettes with my mother that passed through my mind. And they were all vignettes of having a difficult experience of something together. But I saw them from a higher perspective. And suddenly what was painful, I saw was all happening in love's service. There was something in every interaction that was food for us to grow and change. And then very abruptly, after maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 of these vignettes, the whole thing came to an end. And I had this moment of, what would you call it? A moment of gratitude for the wholeness of it. It felt as if my mother had birthed my body into this world, and I had just birthed her soul back into the, you know, whatever you want to call it, the universal soul. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I opened my eyes, and the way I always tell the story is it's like my vision was half a click off. I could see that, you know, things were solid. You rap on the desk, it's solid. But I could also see that it was made of light, and everything was moving, changing, interdependent in that light. And I you know, was just full of wonder. And I looked across the now dead body of my mother, because this all happened just as she was dying. I looked, and there was my son, Justin. And because he was made of both light and form, he actually had a halo, and he was weeping. This was so amazing. He was weeping, and little rainbows were coming out of his tears. You know, something to do with the light and form. And he looked at me with eyes so filled with light, compassion, and absolute amazement. So I went around the bed and I sat next to my beautiful son. And he looked at me and he said, "Mom, I had a vision." And I said, "Well, what was it?" And he said, "It doesn't matter, but this is what I know now." And now he was weeping, full of amazement. He said, "Grandma Lily," that was my mother, Lillian, "Grandma Lily was a very great being. And I can't believe she did this. She took and led a life so much smaller than who she was out as a gift to you, because you're meant to be a teacher of love, and you could never teach it unless you had felt unloved." And he kept shaking his head. How could a person give a whole lifetime in service of someone else? And then Justin grabbed me and leapt to his feet with me. and and remember the Ren and Stimpy song, "Happy, Happy, Joy, Joy." And there we were singing and dancing that song around the shell of my mother.
Wow.
And it was amazing. And to this day, you know, I put my hand on my heart, and your listeners can do this. You know, the heart has its own separate nervous system, and you stimulate that with a kind hand on your heart, and you can bring up a treasured memory. And we all know that these treasured memories release different hormones of bonding, of connection, of reward, of joy within us. And so I bring up, whoever thought that bringing up a memory of death could in fact fill the whole body with joy and a remembrance of this core of loving kindness, which is always there, no matter the dramas and the theaters of the soul that spring from it. And so I have that. That's my anchor. That's my faith. And for me, that was the most touching, amazing experience. But I've probably had, oh gosh, I don't know how many, 20, 30, 40 experiences of that light in different ways that's come over this lifetime. And so Joseph Campbell also said once to somebody interviewing who said, "What's your faith?" Joseph Campbell said, "It's not a matter of faith for me, it's a matter of experience." And so that's how it is for me as well.
Wow. I feel so honored to hear that story. Such a beautiful story.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And it feels so relevant for us right now. And, you know, may this time for us be a time of, you know, remembering who and what we are, and slowing down enough to connect with parts of our being that we haven't been able to, because we've been moving so quickly for so long.
Exactly.
And I'm wondering if you would be willing to lead us just through whatever feels good to you, a very brief prayer or meditation.
Yes, yes, I would love to. I know better now than to try to sing on Zoom, but I'm gonna just say anyhow. There is a lovely chant, maybe some people know it, which is simply, I am remembering who I am. I am remembering who I am. I am remembering. I am remembering. So put your hand on your heart and allow your eyes to close. And notice your feet are on the floor. Put them on the floor if they're not. And feel the Mother Earth beneath you. And now imagine that a little filament of light attached to the top of your head, which can just bring your body up into a straight and noble position, because you are a bridge between earth and heaven. And that bridge meets within your heart. And so now just imagine that your breath can come up through your feet and down through your head at the same time and meet in your heart. And when you breathe out, the light of your own heart can reach out to others. As you breathe in through your feet, through your head, and let that breath meet in your heart, you can imagine that your heart begins to grow brighter, that the light that has always been within you is shining, and that light is extending out. I'm extending my light to you, Molly, to everybody who's listening, to my family. Let's all do that together. To all the people in our country who are grieving, whether it's an ancient grief from slavery or a modern grief from this COVID pandemic. Let us extend our heart light, our love to all and all people in this earth. And so now just a few blessings of loving kindness. First, for yourself. It's so important to be gentle with ourselves and to let yourself feel whatever you're feeling. And so you can repeat these simple blessings. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be happy. And we extend these blessings now to our own intimate circle of beloveds. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be happy. And we extend them to our whole country. May we all be filled with loving kindness. May all be well. May all be peaceful and at ease. May all be happy. And to our whole globe, our whole world, all of nature. May all beings be filled with loving kindness and the recipients of loving kindness. May all be well, whole, healed, and healthy. May all be peaceful and find their North Stars. May all be kind. May all beings be happy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Deep, deep, deep gratitude. It was beautiful.
My privilege. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Our honor. And Joni, you guys be well, be healthy. And thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Much love, my darling.
Take care.